people say chance favors the prepared mind is what they say, right? But what it means really is if you're clear about what you want, at random these opportunities will present themselves, but then you'll observe them. If you're not clear about what you want, you'll miss them. Yeah, so I was just telling you before we started, I come from a different era. In the sense, went to school, never really thought about what I'm going to become or what I want to do and so on. Some of my friends, I really didn't give much attention to my academic performance. I mean, I was performing very well. I was topping my school, my class, but I didn't bother too much about it. My friends, somewhat older to me in sense, at least more mature, they came home and told my mother, this guy's nuts, he should write IIT exam. I didn't even know there was something called an IIT. I mean, this was my level of of exposure. So I found out what it was and prepared a little bit. In those days, I think I was in a system where the school exams ended in December. This ISC. So I had 6 months, 5 months left. So I prepared for the IIT exam only in that period, and I wrote the exam and somehow did well enough and got admission. And that time my dad moved to Chennai, so I said, okay, let me also go to IIT Chennai. Otherwise, I would have gone to IIT Bombay, and chose engineering branch simply on the basis of mechanical. I had mechanical in IIT Madras at that time was what all the top rankers took. So, but mechanical, I was very small built, and somehow in my mind, I had no idea what these things were. I thought mechanical very unsafe, unsuitable to me, so I took electrical. Okay, I mean, really, no sane basis for doing any of these things. I had no idea what all this is about. And then fourth year or something, I think some of them started asking some of us what we were going to do and so on. So I just, then I started wondering about, my mentors told me I should go abroad to do a PhD. And that actually one can get an assistantship and so on, because otherwise it was unthinkable. I mean, no way my dad could send me even for the airfare, we had to take a loan. So then I started thinking about what subjects, because then I thought the subjects that were really fascinating to us in our undergraduate program was this, as I told you, we were taught networks and analog circuits and so on. So I told my mentors, I'll go and do analog circuits. And they said, no, these are all getting very mature areas. In India, we don't have, if you're going to come back, you better do some of the more modern areas. You do communications or you do something like that. Then they also told me, don't get into something which requires a lot of laboratory equipment and laboratories and so on, because if you are going to come back, you're not going to be able to pursue it, because the India of those days didn't look like it would become like the India of today. Okay. So they said, do something, do an area where you can work with pen and paper. And then I looked around and I felt, okay, this signal processing and speech processing, because the signal processing, is very similar to what you do in networks and analog. So I could follow that. So I said, that looks like a reasonable sort of theoretical, but, new area. So let me go into speech processing, signal processing is what I decided. So I went and I got admission in some university. I went there. And once I went there, my thesis advisor, had a different, somewhat, it's not signal processing really. It was more communications. I had a much more new, hot topic in which he wanted me to work. So that was fine. So once I went there, I took a whole slew of courses and brought myself up to date in the area of communications, and sort of switched over to signal processing communications, that combination, and did a PhD. And I sort of tried to prepare myself for a return, because I wanted to come back pretty soon. I didn't want to stay there for very long. And but then I thought, let me get some research experience. So I joined Bell Laboratories for 2 years. Told them that I'm not going to stay here. I don't want a green card. I don't want to apply. So I just want to learn. So I wanted flexibility to learn. So some of those people were known to my advisor. So I told them, look, I'm really interested in learning as much as possible. So they told me to join as a postdoc, not as a regular employee. Because postdocs, they don't really expect too much from them. They give them freedom. So too much meaning they don't tell them what they have to do. So it's after all a company, right? So I joined as a postdoc fellow, and every 6 months, I was there for almost 2 years. Every 6 months, I used to change my mentor and work with a different person. I learned almost 3 different types of areas in communications. Things were very different. In fact, I didn't continue with my PhD area at all. That's one of the freedoms I got by becoming a postdoc. They were looking to hire me in an area which, of course, was related to my PhD. But when I went as a postdoc, I actually went into wireless. I told them I want to learn wireless communications. I had not done wireless communications for my except some coursework in my PhD program. But I felt that by that time I felt that if I come back to India, I was working on speech and image compression and so on, and somehow it looked to me very compute intensive, and my imagination of what might not be possible in India at that time, I felt it's better to move into wireless. And I had a fascination for wireless. I liked the mathematics and all, which all I got exposed to after going there. So I got the freedom to move into a new area because of going as a postdoc. So that was the way my own, I chose my own PhD area, and the reason I chose it was because of this a priori decision to try and become an academic back in India. Okay, at the prodding of some of my role models. In the US, at least, the supervisors tend to be very open and friendly. Yeah. So my supervisor too he was actually not very old. He joined it turned out that he joined the university where I went the same time I joined there. He had come from Bell Labs. I mean, I didn't know when I applied, he was not on the faculty, and he was just 44 years old at that time. Okay, he was very young. So he was already a rising star, and he actually he ran I was one of the first students in his group. And he built a group very quickly, and very open man, very free person. He used to invite us to his house and so on. So that was me. He was a very good role model for me. I mean, I learned a lot. In fact, that is the only type of supervision I knew. I didn't know of any other kind. And so then, when I came back here, I tried to emulate the same approach. I tried to give my students full freedom to do what they want, choose the problem area, do whatever they want, help them only to the extent they want. Right, and try to tell them to learn from other things, learn from other groups, also attend other meetings. Because that's what I was encouraged to do. Those who were cut out for academics, I used to tell them, why don't you think of academics? Why don't you look at it, and why don't you train you? I used to ask them to be TAs in my course. I used to teach some 8 or 9 courses. So I used to tell these students to become my TA in different courses, enable them to go deeper as a teacher. I get them to handle the tutorials. They should do that. So I think they see how students react. They see how different types of minds work. So I should try to give them exposure, those who want to go into academics. And I was also, one of the things I wanted to do when I came back to India was to try to see how to make some difference here, in the India of the 80s. So wanted to learn, India had very little industry in electronics or anything, wanted to make products, wanted to work with industry, try to create new industry and so on. So started doing a lot of projects after I came back here, and all that I learned here. When I was the US is so, I mean, you are now in Europe also. They are so well oiled and such an advanced economy that people are specialized. So when you do your PhD, you really don't have any exposure to industry. Of course, in Germany it's different. People go to industry, work, and come back to do a PhD. But in the US, it's not like that. So I really had no exposure to any real product design or product engineering or anything in my PhD or even in Bell Labs. Bell Labs is just like a glorified university where I went. So I came back and I started learning, along with Professor Junjunwala and another Professor Gonzalez. We started learning by doing, just by making things ourselves and making mistakes. But we started building boards, making products, trying to get projects from companies, build products for them, and so on. And so students who I felt were, or whom I felt might be better suited for industry, I used to tell them, look, why don't you join one of my projects also? Go slow, go a little slower on your PhD, build some things in parallel, learn some things, how to, what it takes to do product design, product engineering, and so on. So some of them did that. Some of them actually, of course, I had a lot of masters. IIT Madras has masters by research also, which is some kind of a mini PhD. So I had a lot. I have done some 25, 30 master students. Most of them are masters which led to product design. And all of them are, and if you go to Bangalore today and look at the wireless companies there, most of my students are in there, and they're actually still building products. Okay, they're not building 5G products. So they build 4G products. So there's a whole set of people. So couple of my PhDs also got into that. And, so I try to do that. Are you cut out for industry? Are you cut out for academia? And try to, help them, train themselves a little better for that while they did their PhD. So this is what I learned from my supervisor, and try to give the same freedom here. See, ultimately, if you decide to go, whether you do a PhD or not, even if you go to a job after a bachelor's, one thing you have to realize is learning period is a 10-year, 15-year period, in anything, whether you're going to play cricket or whether you're going to learn music. So you can do, you can do it formally, you can do it informally. If you join a good job where they really teach you and you learn on the job a lot, you can even be a plain old BSc and you can really become fantastic. Okay. It doesn't matter, right? All your learning is, of course, informal. There are no credentials to show for it, but you learn a lot. Whether if you do a PhD and go for an academic job or industry job, it's the same thing. It'll take, PhD may finish in 4 years, but it'll take you another 5 years, 6 years before you really know in your bones that you are pretty good at something. Okay. So I should tell them that it'll take you that long, right? It'll take you that long. And during this period of learning, you have to focus on what you're learning and where you're getting a chance to learn. And, so you have to look for opportunities to learn. From learning comes from really good people and good environment. And that's what you should focus on, where you select where you want to go, where you want to be. Don't look at the title they give you. Don't look at the salary they give you, right? Not for these years. Okay. Wherever. And, people say, right, opportunity favors those who are, chance favors the prepared mind is what they say, right? But what it means really is if you're clear about what you want, at random, these opportunities will present themselves, but then you'll observe them. If you're not clear about what you want, you'll miss them. That's what chance favors the prepared mind actually means. The chance always happens. Some individual, who's really a very good person, potentially to be a mentee of, to work with, you will meet somewhere, but you will not register that this person has these qualities because you're not looking for it. So if you're clear about what you want, if your mind is prepared, you will notice the opportunity and you will grab it. This is actually the way to interpret that statement. So I think that is something I tell my students, be very clear. I tell this to my BTechs also. It doesn't matter. You want to go for a job, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? So you got to be very clear that next 10, 12 years is learning period, and focus on where you get the chance to learn, and where you get the opportunity to learn, where they give you that freedom to learn and that inputs to learn. So good mentors, good environment. If you're working in a company, the attitude of the company to business, to customers, everything matters. If you made a mistake, you join the wrong one, quit and go to another one. If you found the wrong guide, then you quit. Not that cannot happen, but you will get the right opportunity and then grab it and learn. And I think by the time you spend 10, 12 years, you'll know in your bones that, yes, I think I know this stuff pretty well, right? Not that you stop learning, and then you can, be independent and you can learn on your own and you can drive. This is something that I think everybody must know, particularly PhDs, because you are committed to a lifelong life of learning. So this is very important. No, new IITs, see, we set up 5 IITs originally in 1959 to 63. If you look at the rate at which IITs were set up, it was no less than now, than in 2008 onwards. In fact, I will tell you, I've looked at the records of IIT Madras. IITs were set up much faster than now. We had built, in IIT Madras, had built all the major departments and buildings within 5-6 years, 4-5 years. Now it takes much more time for various reasons. Okay. But I think, the new IITs, India is a big country, right? India is like all of Europe. So 20 IITs, if you do it right, is not too many. If you do it wrong, of course, even 2 are too many, right? So if you do it right, so I'm not worried about the number. Okay. And I think they are all coming up reasonably well because 50 years later, we know how to do this. They're all seeded by good people from the older IITs. So they will come up well. I don't see a big problem. I mean, there could be ups and downs now and then in some institute, but that's okay. I think they'll come up well, as long as the government uses the same model, give their autonomy and everything. What's happened, of course, in the country is that, you have to understand that, and this is something that I never appreciated when I came back, that, what you saw as a undergraduate is you think that's what will continue, right? You're not seeing I had not even understood India's trajectory from the 50s, right? Never understood what GDP means, never understood any of these things. Okay. So if I'd understood that, then I would have seen through that time itself where we are heading to some extent. Okay, maybe the slope will be different, but you'll know where you're heading. So that assumption is totally wrong, right? So you must understand that. I mean, just to give you one data point, if you think in dollar terms, because even dollar has inflation, but inflation in those countries, as you know, is much lower. Okay, so you assume that there's zero inflation in US and Europe, which is not correct, but let's sort of assume. Then you sort of take the Indian salary for an assistant professor at IIT Madras, IIT joining salary. When I joined and when now, so 1986 and 2020, right? So in dollar terms, it has gone up 6 to 7 times. I would say in 10 years time, 12 years time, you have to assume that a faculty member in IIT will probably be paid the same amount to start with, starting as a faculty member in Germany. Which means you never know, you may start having free movement of people, Germans may apply, Indians, right? So, I mean, this is what you have to understand. So we must understand what it means for India's, when they say India's GDP will become 5 trillion, 10 trillion, what does it mean? Right? What does it mean what does it mean to a laborer? What does it mean to you? Right? Laborer, it means something else. It means their income will double, so they'll live more comfortably than they are today. But what does it mean at the high end, towards the PhD and so on? It means that actually you become truly globalized. I think so. See, so this is, as I told you, one of the things that I wanted to do when I came back from the US was build some products. So what we have done in IIT Madras and other IITs have done it also is to create an environment where actually youngsters who want to do this can do it, can, when they feel they have an idea and want to plunge into it on their own, can actually attempt to build the product, get help as required, right? And so on. So that's all we have done. We have, earlier what in 90s and 2000, what people could do in our labs in telecom, right? What people like Rohit could do in my lab, for example, and Junjunwala lab, that we are now enabled to do without necessarily being part of a lab, by creating an ecosystem where you can sort of set up your own little lab and do it also, taking help as you need. That's what the incubation ecosystem is, right? Of course, you're also trying to run a company, so you need to learn about all that also. So we try to provide all the inputs required. These are all informal learning, right? There's no formal learning. It's all informal learning. So it takes, again, several years if you're building stuff, it'll take 6, 7, 8 years for a company to succeed or not succeed. You can't do it in 2, 3 years. So most of our companies which are building things, making products, the time for them to either fail or succeed is 6, 7 years. You have to support them for that long. They have to start making some money within 3, 4 years. That's the reason is it's not that the money is important, it is, but facing customers and actually seeing whether the idea you have, anybody wants it or not, is a very important part of the whole thing. So if you don't make money, that means you're hiding from that. Okay, so that's not going to help. You've got to sell. So that should start by 3rd or 4th year, but it'll take 7, 8 years before you can actually be cut free from your mother. So that's the sort of system we have built. That's the incubation setup we have built. Yeah, I would say, so the one thing is, we were producing 100 PhDs a year, 4 IITs totally produced 400. Okay, and opportunities were less, but also competition was less. Now we are producing 5,000, I think, 3, 4, 5,000 in the IITs and IISc. Plus, there are people coming back from abroad. So you guys have a lot of competition. Okay. So I think when you have a lot of competition, obviously you have to expect people who are better, people who are not better than you. Okay. So you've got to have few options. I think diversity is very important, right? Having a very narrow, there are people who have a very narrow pathway in their life and they struggle more, but that's okay. If they are ready to struggle, it's fine. So if you want to become a musician and you are very clear that's all you can ever be, it's always tough, right? Always tough. Very tough. Okay. But if you say I can be a musician, but I can also be a part-time musician and, I can take a office job and also practice my music, and to the extent I want, then it's easier. Okay. So similarly for PhD students, I would say people should go with their options open. You can join industry, you can join laboratories like DRDO, ISRO and so on, and CSIR and so many other labs. And then you can also become an academic. These are 3 options, right? And industry will, I think, expand. I think industry will not just be core engineering industry or core science industry. It could also be, as for physics PhDs in the US, you could also join finance, Wall Street. That will also happen in India also very soon. Okay. So there is going to be options, and you have to sort of keep your options open. Again, see what you like, see what attracts you, and see what opportunities present themselves to you, and take that route. If you really want to be an academic, then you have to train yourself to be one. I think you have to make it clear to your guide, and you have to then throw yourself into that. You have to learn teaching. You have to learn, you have to learn how to diversify, because academic definitely not going to be working in what you started out with, right? I mean, what I'm doing now is nothing to do with what I did for my PhD. So it's going to be like that. So you have to learn how to diversify to new fields, completely new fields, and you have to learn that. So all of that you have to learn. If you're in industry, you have to learn different things, right? If you want to go and join industry with after a PhD, you have to learn a different set of skills. So then that's what seems to attract you. You have to try to get into a group or a project. You have to get into, tell your guide that you want to work in the project that he's taking up, right? So maybe you switch from your scholarship to a project position, take one more year to do your PhD, whatever, right? Make those choices and learn, right? Or take even a year off and go in the industry and come back. I mean, whatever, right? I think, as I said, it's a 10-year learning period. How you do it is not important. I mean, it's important. What you do is important, but there are many ways of doing this thing, many ways of getting this learning. And then you train yourself, and once you are clear, that's what you want to be. Because you may also change your mind after 1 year, thinking you want to be in industry. You may decide, no, I want to be an academic. That's okay. It'll take a little longer one more year to get to where you are, but it doesn't matter. So that's going to be the advice I want to give PhD students, that there are options. You can be an entrepreneur. So, just the thing is not to just do your courses, do the research, do what your guide tells you. You have to do all that, but you should also keep your eyes and ears open and throw yourself into various things. Guides can sometimes get a little uncomfortable. They feel that you are ditching them or something. So keep them aware of what you're doing, why you're doing, right? And they will help you. And, and then by the time you're done in 5-6 years, you'll have some idea, a pretty clear idea of what you want to be. Then choose your postdoc or your industry job or your whatever, on that basis, and, learn more and become really good at. I think the thing is to, in 10 or 12 years, become really good at something. I think that's very important, right? That's what all youngsters must do, even whether you do a PhD or not. Even if, as I said, if you go into a job, right? 10, 12 years from the age of 21, 22, 23 or whatever till the age 32, 33, you have to really spend time becoming good at something.